What's going on, guys? Welcome to the video. So we're going to look at a couple of clips from the Australian Sky News Network. The host was discussing the new Prime Minister Boris Johnson, the current Brexit situation, and the incident that happened at Pride last week, with Brendan Oneil, a journalist from The Spectator, who savages the anti-democratic politicians in the UK, along with Jeremy Corbyn's flip-flopping, and he also discusses the Brexit Party's rise into political prominence. He does not pull his punches though, so let's check it out.
I spoke to him about Boris Johnson and Brexit, and I started off by asking him, mentioning that, of course, the last time he and I spoke, it was whether Boris would actually be Prime Minister. Brendan predicted accurately that he would be. But also, now I asked Brendan about the exciting new vibe that has taken over in Britain since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. Brendan Oneil
has finally fulfilled his destiny, as he no doubt sees it, and become Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And it's caused what can only be described as hysteria among the chattering classes and the PC elite. I mean, I can't remember a meltdown like this since the Brexit vote itself. I mean, they've really gone completely nuts about the fact that Boris is now in Downing Street. And the way they're talking about it, you'd actually think Britain had just been taken over by, you know, genuine Nazis. I mean, they really are unhinged in the way they talk about Boris as this kind of grave threat to Britain and this evil, racist, misogynistic Prime Minister, none of which is true at all. They've completely taken leave of their senses. Everyone needs to ignore the Boris derangement syndrome that's taking place in the UK and recognise that actually his government's got off to a pretty good start.
So Brendan wastes no time pointing out the complete hysteria of the Remoaners in the UK now Boris Johnson is Prime Minister, and how the hysteria we're seeing is reminiscent of 2016. I would say this has only been beaten by the meltdown that occurred when the God Emperor Donald Trump got elected in 2016 over in the United States. I mean, we have had shitweasels like Ian Blackford calling Boris Johnson a racist in the Houses of Parliament twice in 1 week recently. We are at unprecedented levels of Brexit and Boris derangement syndrome right now, with no signs of it going away. It will likely only get worse. Take my video last night on the medicine shortage Project Fear nonsense that the BBC News programme had reported. It was a complete load of toff without any substance, just there to sway the public opinion against no deal. This reporter even uses the term Boris derangement syndrome, drawing a little chuckle out of the Australian host. I want to hear Boris say Brexit or Boris derangement syndrome in the House of Commons. That would be funny. Let's check out the next clip though.
It was very impressive. He was very Churchillian. Obviously, he's written about Churchill. When he was flaying Jeremy Corbyn there on the floor of Parliament, it was very impressive stuff. How worried are Labour that they don't have the measure of this bloke?
I think they're really worried, and I think the first appearance that Boris made at the dispatch box in Parliament, his first appearance as Prime Minister, he wiped the floor with Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, it was such a humiliating spectacle for the Labour Party. The thing that he did which was most powerful and which will really have resonated with Labour voters, traditional working class Labour voters, he really took Corbyn to task for the fact that Corbyn has been a lifelong Eurosceptic. He has been anti-EU all his life. In that sense, he follows in the tradition of great Labour figures like Tony Benn, who all were passionately anti-European Union and anti-EEC. And Corbyn abandoned all of those democratic principles over the past couple of years and has now turned the Labour Party into a Remainer party, into a pro-EU party, into a pro-second referendum party. It is the biggest abandonment of political principle in living memory in this country. It's really astonishing and humiliating for Corbyn. And Boris just dragged him over the coals in relation to that and said, you've abandoned your principles, you were a Eurosceptic and now you're a slavish devotee of Brussels. So all of those things, not only did it provide good viewing for those of us who like to watch what happens in the House of Commons, but also it really signalled that the Boris government intends, I think, to try to tap into traditional working class Labour voters who feel completely and utterly abandoned by the kind of woke bourgeois machine that the Labour Party has become in recent years.
So the host then talks about Boris absolutely destroying Jeremy Corbyn during Prime Minister's questions last week, and are the Labour Party worried about that? Well, we all know they will be dropping soy logs in their knickers over the mauling Boris dished out to Commissar Corbynov. Brendan rightly points out Boris wiped the floor with him in such a way it was actually embarrassing. He went on to state Boris Johnson's speech would have resonated with some of the Labour voters. This is likely the 5 million who voted to leave, and possibly others who may be extremely disillusioned with the Marxist ideology taking over the Labour Party. And of course, some will be confused that Corbyn, who has been an anti-EU all his life, now decides to flip-flop over to Remain when historically the Labour Party has been anti-EU and anti-ECC. He rightly tells the Aussie host Corbyn has abandoned democratic principles over the last few years, turning them into a pro-Remain party, which is not what we should be calling these parties now. We should be calling them anti-democratic authoritarian parties, as that's what Labour and the Lib Dems are right now. They want to wipe their arse with democracy because they don't like the result of a democratic vote. I've been calling out Corbyn's Remain status since before he even out and out said it. We all knew Labour was going to go this way, and if Corbyn didn't follow his radical party members, he would be ousted as leader. He won't give up party leadership, so he was always going to become a Remoaner. Boris was waiting to become PM, so he could call out this worthless fuckpig, and he did it like a boss. Let's check out the next clip.
Now, he had a great line about body snatchers. He used the image of the body snatchers, invasion of the body snatchers, how Jeremy Corbyn had changed. But there's another phrase which is doing the rounds to do with, I think it's the undead zombies within Boris Johnson's own party. So these were the Remainers within the Theresa May cabinet, Brendan, who he would very swiftly clean that lot out and put in some very good people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and others. So how much of a threat are those Remainers? Is there a threat of civil war yet to come within the Conservative Party, or are they just going to sit back and hope Boris can get them out of Brexit and win the election?
I think there is a huge risk of civil war in the Tory party, and I think Remoaners, that section of the political class which is deeply, profoundly anti-Brexit and, in my view, anti-democratic, they are a complete and utter menace to democracy. They are a menace to freedom. They are a menace to the millions upon millions of people who voted in good faith to leave the European Union. I mean, it's really astonishing. It's quite difficult to explain to people outside of the UK just how much of a war on democracy we are currently living through. For the past 3+ years, various sections of the establishment, the majority of the establishment, in fact, have declared open war on the democratic mandate, on the 17 million strong vote for Brexit. They're using every single trick in the book to try to make sure that it doesn't happen. And, you know, lots of people, including people in Boris's own government, are saying that if we don't make Brexit happen, then it could be the end of the Tory party as we know it, because everyone will abandon us. But it's far more profound than that. I would say that if they don't make Brexit happen, it's the end of democracy as we know it. Wow. And Britain's claim to be a democratic nation will be massively called into question if the largest democratic vote in the history of this country is not pushed through. So I think that's really what is at stake. And I think some people in Boris's government understand that. I wish more of them did, because then we might have a chance of saving democracy in this country.
So the host asked about the so-called undead zombies in the Tory party and any threat they might pose to Boris Johnson's government and the possibility of civil war within the Tory party. He is of course talking about guys like Rory the Soy Boy Stuart, Dominic Grieve and Philip Hammond, who have done their best to hinder Brexit and are nothing more than dirty traitors to this country and its people. Pointing out Boris cleared out these scumbags from the cabinet and brought in the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg to fix what they fucked up. We all know there is a great risk of a battle amongst the Tory MPs, but I would say that risk is mitigated by the fact that a lot of the Tory rebels won't want to lose the Tory whip. Some of course won't care, others might defect to the Liberal undemocrats. Who knows, but I think most will not want to lose their lucrative political career. 80 grand a year plus expenses is something you don't really want to give up, is it? Then let's not forget the many media appearances and newspaper columns they are paid to do. It's definitely not going to be easy for them to give that shit up, is it? Brendan thinks some of the undemocratic Remoaners within the Tory party might try to cause some problems because, as he says, they are a complete and utter menace to democracy and freedom, calling it completely astonishing how hard it is to explain to people outside the UK that we are currently living in a time where there is an out-and-out war on democracy by a large proportion of the political and media elite. The mainstream media and politicians have declared open warfare on democracy in the UK because they don't like how democracy works, I guess. He is right. A lot of people don't know that the UK is fighting for democracy with itself right now. The Remoaners and their screaming band of lunatics are doing all they can to stop Brexit happening with the help of politicians and 99% of the mainstream media in the UK. I bet European broadcasters are more favourable towards Brexit than the UK media are right now. It's literally that bad. Brendan finishes up that clip saying what we have all known for months. If the Tory don't deliver Brexit, and a proper Brexit at that, then they are finished as a political party. Like UKIP, it is now that the Brexit party have come to the forefront in politics, with a much more politically correct Nigel Farage leading them, and people like Anne Widdecombe there to give them some credibility. The Tories won't need a new party to finish them off like UKIP did. They can do that themselves by not delivering on the mandate 17.4 million people voted for, as that will signal the end of the Tory party for at least a decade or two, if not much longer. And maybe more importantly, will destroy any trust people have in democracy if the Brexit vote is not honoured. People like To Swinson and her band of undemocratic cumbuckets, like Labour, are trying to destroy democracy in favour of a communist system, I would expect. It's ironic that the people who call everyone a Nazi actually want to overthrow democracy to suit their authoritarian views. Brendan is wrong about one thing though. Britain's democracy is already in question because we have still not honoured the democratic wish of the people 3 years on. We are not a democratic nation at the moment. Let's check out the next clip.
Now, Nigel Farage, obviously, what's the ground now? Nigel Farage kind of rode in on his white horse a few months ago. In fact, when he was out in Australia, he announced that he was getting back in the saddle and taking the charge up because he was so dismayed about Theresa May's lies and complete incompetence. So we saw the surge for the Brexit party and Nigel Farage. How does your good, honest Brexiteer choose? Do they go for Boris if there's a general election, or do they go for Farage? And do you think Boris will wait to call the general election until after he has delivered Brexit?
That's the million-dollar question. My instinct right now is that Boris will try to push through his version of Brexit, which could well be a no-deal Brexit. I don't think it will successfully go through Parliament because Parliament is absolutely ram-packed with anti-democrats and Remoaners, and I think it might be at that point that he calls a general election to try and get a public democratic mandate for finally leaving the European Union, even though we've given that democratic mandate many times over the past few years. But I think the way in which it's going to pan out will be really interesting. And the question of Farage versus Boris is one of the most interesting clashes at the moment right now. And the way I see it is that the Brexit Party has already had a very positive impact on British politics. As you say, they completely cleaned up at the EU elections in May. They won more than 5 million votes. They were the winning party. And that managed to put huge pressure on the Boris camp and on the Tory party to realise that they really have to get serious about Brexit, or the Brexit party will be breathing down their neck. So when it comes to a general election, my view will be whichever of these two parties is offering the most serious version of Brexit is the one that Democrats ought to support.
And do you think we could end up with, instead of David Cameron and Nick Clegg, could we end up with Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage after an election in some kind of coalition or joint leadership of that whole movement?
I mean, that is a distinct possibility. If Boris didn't get enough to form a majority and the Brexit Party did well, and the polls predict they will do well, it is very possible that that will happen. I think there's a bit of bad blood between Boris and Farage, and I do think they have different views of what Brexit means. And, for example, Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party don't just want to get Brexit over the line. They also, as their slogan says, they want to change politics for good. So they want to shake up every facet of British politics, from the civil service to the House of Lords and all the other kind of anti-democratic layers that currently exist. So they do have a more radical take. Whether that will marry up very well with Boris's slightly more conservative take, we have to wait and see. But the big question still remains, as it has been for 3 years and probably will be for the next 3 years: when are we going to get the thing we voted for? And that is what millions of people are rather impatiently asking.
So the host asked about Nigel Farage's part to play in this current situation. Which party should the honest Brexiteer go for now the Tory party is led by Boris Johnson, and should a general election be called? Like me, Brendan thinks we will end up in a general election, which I have mixed feelings on. On the one hand, a general election would be good to drain the swamp of any Remoaning MPs inside the Tory party if they want to campaign on a no-deal Brexit platform. But on the other hand, it won't be, as I feel Nigel Farage will stand his MPs against Tory MPs in every single constituency because he will want the glory of delivering Brexit, not realising, like in Brecon the other day, two individual Brexit supporting parties standing against each other and the new undemocratic Remoaner alliance led by the commie cumbucket Toe Swinson will end up in a Brexiteer defeat and a communist run in the country. The Brexit party won the Brecon by-election for the Liberal Democrats. The Remoaner alliance did not win it. There was a 10% swing in that region in favour of the Lib Dems, which was the 10% share of the vote the Brexit party got. The Brexit supporting party's votes combined with the Tory party would have been like 50% of the total vote, giving them a clear majority. Of course, the Tories did not help themselves by letting the same candidate run, but in their defence, he had a good result considering the Brexit party hijacked some of the votes and of course what he did. It's not a good situation for us to be in though, when two political parties with the same aim disregard that common goal and end up letting Remainers win. Both the Tory party and the Brexit party need to be held account for what happened in Brecon, and they need to take a good look at themselves. You can't beat a Remoaner alliance if they're trying to one-up each other at the end of the day. Brendan rightly points out that the Brexit party has had a positive impact on politics. It was them, after all, that forced Maybot into resigning because the Tory party knew they would lose a general election to the Brexit party with her as leader. But now I feel the Brexit party might be hurting Brexit more than helping it by running against the Tories. Politicians are going to have to be smart to outwit the undemocratic fuckpigs trying to stop Brexit. Personal gain and party politics needs to be left out of it. I might have to pay for a voice over internet protocol service and have a word with Nigel Farage about the Brecon by-election using my studio microphones rather than the terrible quality mic on my mobile phone. He has a show tomorrow, so I'll have to look into it. In the final bit of that clip, the host asked if Boris and Nigel could enter into a coalition, which, as I said earlier, if they stand against each other, they might not well be the biggest party to even make that decision. The Lib Dems can't win if the Brexiteer vote is united. If a Remain party wins the next general election, it will be the fault of the Brexit supporting parties, once again letting us down like Maybot did. Anyway, let's move on to the final clip, which is not about Brexit, but about the Muslim woman who abused the gay pride parade in London last week.
Now, Brendan, just before we go, a lovely article you've written in the Spectator Coffee House today, and of course people can read you on your own Spiked Online, which is a fantastic read always. You've written about this interesting situation where a woman in a niqab was abusing a gay pride march.
Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on all of you!
So you had classic homophobia coming from a woman in a niqab. Tell us this story, it's extraordinary.
It's really an extraordinary video clip that has now gone viral of this woman covered from head to toe in this medieval black cloth, screaming at a pride marcher, saying, "Shame on you, you people are despicable," and as you say, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Really bizarre spectacle, and it's really thrown the woke left into disarray. They don't know which way to turn because, of course, they're very pro-pride and pro-gay, but they also think it's a tantamount to a speech crime to criticise anyone who wears the niqab or to criticise Islam in general. So they're really torn over this, and I've noticed they've been far softer on this woman than they would normally be on homophobes, which suggests that their determination never to raise a critical point about Islam has really reached pathological levels. And the argument I would make is that Islam, like every other ideology and religion and creed, needs to be as open to frank criticism and mick-taking and ridicule as everything else. And that's the message I would take. If we really want to challenge these backward views that this woman was spouting, we have to subject her faith to public ridicule.
Okay, so Brendan calls out the left's inability to deal with the situation, as I did in my Jess Phillips video the other day. Anyone with half a brain cell knows that any religion is not exactly best friends with the gay community. This is the problem. How does the woke left deal with two groups they claim are oppressed, that don't get on with each other, and clash from time to time? Who do they defend? Who can they label a Nazi? We already heard the Labour MP and commie cumbucket Jess Phillips blame the tension on the far right in the video I just mentioned about the tensions between the Muslim community and the LGBT community, proving they have no idea how to deal with it. So go back to the usual scapegoat, the far right. I like this Brendan guy though. He is calling out the special treatment some people get from the left because they are scared, as I have said in my videos before. Remember though, if this was a Brexiteer shouting shit like that at gay people, the left would be baying for blood, demanding a 10-year prison sentence, lose his job and his house, terrorise his family, you know, the usual shit the rabid leftists do. So I'm going to end the video there guys. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Remember to leave a like, subscribe with the little notification bell to know when I upload more content, and share this video as it helps the channel a lot, and I will see you all in the next one.
Jeremy Cunt. I'm so sorry, Jeremy Hunt. I've never said that before in my life. It's usually men who say that.